Hello, everybody. Just checking. Sound check first. Can you all hear me okay? Yes, I can see you, by the way. The camera is pointed at the audience, so it's very nice to be able to be as if I am with you all. So I'm glad you can hear me. If there are any problems, just let me know. And I'm very sorry I can't be there in person. I would have loved to. It just wasn't possible to do so. I heard the opening presentations, so I have a little bit of a sense of your business school on the AACSB accreditation, which is a fantastic achievement, it is for sure, and of the issues that, of course, are being faced around the world, but that you are particularly facing at this moment in time, and my thoughts are with you on that. So I am here to present the conclusions of about 25 to 30 years of very considered practice, executive leadership, but also academic practice. Really trying to understand, because we're all born, we don't get to choose when we're born, where we're born, or the information we're surrounded with. We have to go on a journey to try to understand it. And as human beings on the planet now, we have been born at perhaps the most incredible time. But making sense of that, getting up to speed with that, understanding why we find ourselves where we are now, and what as leaders we can do to support ourselves and other leaders to move forward at speed in a good direction and not, in fact, make things worse, is very, very hard. So my 2 to 3 decades of effort and focus being in thousands of conversations all over the world, including in building standards, which I will cover, give me a sense of the consensus that is out there. That we know more than we think that we do. We have more solid foundation to move forward from than we think that we do. And if we can understand that clearly, then we can cut through the noise, because there is a lot of noise out there. There are a lot of problems that need attending to. And if we do not, as leaders, have a clear orientation, we will get distracted by that noise. So this is what I'm here to do. I have a short time to do it in. I believe I am going to be told exactly how many minutes, but if I'm able to go to 5 minutes to the hour, but somebody tell me if that's not okay. In the meantime, I will share my screen. Can you all see my screen okay? Yes, okay. And I have put it in a way that I can also see you. I'm going to pin you so that I am able to see you better. Okay, so there are some links here because I am going to only be able to give a whistle-stop overview, which I hope will either reinforce some views that you have or create the basis for a paradigm shift, which I believe is really what we need to go through. So we also there's also a book coming out with 2 co-authors, and there is a LinkedIn community you can join there. Please, if you are on LinkedIn, I'm not sure in Pakistan if you are, but if you are, please do connect with me and do join our book community group. It will be published in November. Okay. So my key takeaways, if nothing else, that I can leave you with right at the beginning, that unsustainability is one massive governance failure at all levels. And it is also a marker of an incredibly inefficient and ineffective economy. But we are not going to be able to fix even the harm, let alone drive the outcomes that we want, unless we fixed failed governance. ESG, which I'm sure some of you are probably scholars in, or you certainly understand the unfolding political remit. It's fantastic, however, to hear that you've just implemented green taxonomy, which I'm assuming in some ways probably mirrors what the EU legislation has been leading on. These are important movements for change, but they are slow, they are not joined up, they are not going to be able to move at the speed they need to unless we have a shift in our understanding of governance. And we need hyper-innovation, and let's not pretend that ESG is really more than a stop doing significant harm issue. So the bottom line is either we concertedly move forwards as a global community, a global leadership community, to a well-being economy that is operationalized by purpose-driven organizations and at its heart powered by meaningful work and lives, purposeful work and lives, then in my assessment, I don't believe there's any other path than us moving to centrally planned command and control systems and losing the market economy because it has failed on its own terms just when we need that market economy most to create the innovative solutions and transfer the capital where it needs to go the most. So that's the whole. So in essence, as leaders, what's lacking globally is not energy. We have enough people now that really understand the scale and the breadth of the urgency to act. But we do not have enough people with the confidence to know what we need to be leading for. And you cannot have this confidence unless we have unity. We need to know that we're not alone in this, that there are a number of us, and that gives us the confidence to bring others with us in this unity. But we cannot unify around nothing. We have to unify around something that is clear. And that is the basis of unity and of our confidence. And it is that clarity that, in my view, has been missing and that I want to give you today. So again, really at speed to say that we, and I will be unpacking this, we have found ourselves in an orchestrated economic system which translates into organizational systems that are set up onto very unhelpful assumptions. And the most unhelpful assumption is the idea that money will equal well-being. That is such a close proxy that if we run after money and we count money, we are in effect counting improvement in our lives. And this is not true. And we all know this is not true. And yet we continue to govern as if it is true. And as a result of that, what we have are GDP-focused economies and governments that are driven by profit-maximizing organizations, and that is not just business, that is universities, that is in many ways charities, and many, many organizations, or I would say most, have become part of this system of counting, in essence, counting financial income and growth in financial income as a marker of its success because of it's a marker of its contribution to the well-being of populations. And it is not true. And that we have, therefore, financially driven work and lives. We focus on how much money we earn because we believe that that money will allow us to buy our well-being on the marketplace. And the more money we have, the more well-being we can buy. Again, this is not that, this has no basis in fact, and yet this is what we continue to do at all levels. So we therefore need to concertedly move to leapfrogging over that assumption. Yes, utilizing and ensuring a fantastic market economy, but one that delivers the goal that it's set up to. Long-term well-being for everyone, which is actually the goal of an economy and the mandate of any government. To do that would mean that we have a well-being economy of which GDP is one potentially useful marker of success, but in no way the marker of success. We have purpose-driven organizations that make a contribution directly to long-term well-being for all people and planet, with financial profit a means to that end. Money can never be an end goal. It is always a means to an end because it is symbolic. It has only the value that we give it. And then that fundamentally driven by meaningful work and lives. Lives where we get value and well-being from the work we do. And yes, also money, which we can then use to buy products and services that we know will improve our well-being and will not destroy it in the process, either in the short or the long term. So, and this is our alternative if not. So we have to get down to some foundations, and I will move quickly, and I do apologize that there are videos and there are many resources for you. So firstly, we have to remind ourselves that the economy is about taking resources and transforming them in a way that will maximize the well-being of society as a whole. This is the foundation. So what is well-being? Well, we could say that well-being is a positive state of being where current and future needs are met, such that there is a capacity and opportunity to flourish. Well-being is the foundational philosophical question, and we have been asking it since the dawn of humanity, and we will continue to. There is no one answer to this. It is an umbrella that captures a good life or flourishing. But then let's look at the definition of sustainable development. Development that meets the needs, in other words, the well-being of the present, without compromising the future, the ability of future generations to have their well-being. And if we distill this, we get to what I think is the first key paradigm shift we have to make, which is that if we keep talking about sustainability in fairly vague or different terms, we cannot operationalize it. We're only able to make it real if we can be clear what is the value that we are seeking from sustainable development. And actually, it's everywhere if we look at it. It's three key things. And I don't mean the pillars. Pillars there are there to support something. I mean what the goal is. And those three things are well-being, not just any old thing. And yes, we need to keep debating what that is. Not just for some people, but for everybody, as every shared ethic would be. And not just now, but into the future. So that is both the goal of the economy and it is the definition of sustainability. So, and we'll return to that. And just to reinforce this, if we're not sure that long-term well-being for all is the mandate that sits at the heart of pretty much everything, if we look at the International Public Sector Accountability Standards Board, they say that the primary function of government is to provide services that enhance or maintain well-being of everybody. And in the UK, our local government is incorporated, they are companies, and all their powers, and they have massive powers to do this, is to focus on delivering well-being. And if you look, you'll see that this is everywhere. So this is a key insight then, that the economy is purpose-driven, it's there to serve the good of others, it is there to serve our good in whatever jurisdiction that is. And international governments are there to do that on behalf of the world as a whole. And so if we the economy should have been delivering well-being, and we have speeded it up, and we have expanded it massively in size in the last 100 years, then why do we find ourselves in a place where the very goal of the economy is in a degraded and existential crisis? Now, I don't have time to go through all of this, and you know, and you mentioned in the opening, a whole range of issues that we are facing. And we know what's on the board here is just a spattering of the major foundational issues. We can talk about planetary boundaries. We can talk about social inequality, inequity, breakdown of mental health. We could talk about antimicrobial resistance, biodiversity loss, climate change, ocean acidification, and we could keep going on in that list. And many of those issues on their own could bring down humanity. And we know that when we look at the science, and we are scientists. However, we focus on climate change for particular reasons, but not necessarily because it's the most urgent, which is a big thing to say, but I believe it's true when we look at the data on biodiversity loss, soil erosion, and other things. So, and one of those is ecological collapse. Again, I don't have time to go into that. We know what's happening in the degradation of nature. And here is an example of the consequence of this that hits business models very directly. This is hand pollination in China, which is not just happening in China, it's been happening in California and elsewhere because of the insect apocalypse, as we call it, the utter decline and crash of flying insects in the world. So if the objective of the economy is sustainability in effect, where did we go so wrong and how do we fix it? Now, this is where I'm going to get into the fundamental framework I want to leave you with. I will go fast, as I say, but it is, I hope, a comprehensive framework you can start to question and use in your areas of expertise. So any impact that we have in the world is because of the decisions that we make in organizations. An organization is people coming together to make decisions as if they were one unit, one person. And routine decisions that are made in those organizations, especially larger ones, are therefore hugely powerful in what effects we have or not in the world. Culture is how we do things around here, both in terms of how we routinely think and how we routinely act. And it is governance that structures this. Governance is the discipline that takes what we think is valuable in the world and enacts that in structures to routinize decision-making in organizations, and is therefore the most powerful driver of the effects we have in the world, as well as the most important driver of culture. Now, I don't have any time to talk about ISO 37000, but I co-led that process for 5 years. It is the world's first expression of really what we mean by governance of organizations as a function, as a discipline. And it is the first time that we've been able to do that in a way that's for any country, in any type of organization, anywhere in the world, from the smallest to the largest, and also in a way that is not related to the problem of the assumptions of the economy that's harming us. So I encourage you to look at that. The definition of governance there is a human system that is directed, overseen, and held accountable for achieving its defined purpose. So purpose is therefore, the direction, oversight of that direction, and accountability for it. So direction is the core that you oversee and account for. And direction gets to the heart of decision making, and it has two key aspects. What is our goal? And what are the parameters within which we achieve that goal? We can ask that about ourselves and the decisions we make in the moment, to why does this organization exist? What is its optimizing or maximizing goal, actually, we should probably say, within what parameters? And why that matters is because we cannot talk about strategy until we know that. Because strategy is merely how do I achieve my goal within the parameters I face. And those parameters are things like the law, and it's also things we can't change, like the weather and time. But in an organization, many, many, many parameters are chosen. Net zero is an example of choosing a parameter within which you make your strategic decisions. And the goals of net zero are merely a goal to enforce a parameter that therefore all decisions ultimately respect. And this brings us to the three logic model that I want to leave you with. So we have three key paradigms of operating our economy, our organizations, and our businesses. And I really believe that almost all organizations will either be frenetic and have no real solid culture or way of or approach, or they will fall into one of these three. And this both explains where we've gone wrong and how we can fix it. And this is an adaptation of Herman Daly's triangle. Herman Daly was one of the original ecological economists. And what his key insight was that while our ultimate goal is well-being for everybody in the longer term, ultimately we have, because of a series of assumptions about how the market works to optimize well-being, we have told organizations, don't worry about well-being, just focus on your own financial self-interest. And that becomes the goal that you want to maximize for, is your financial self-interest. If you do that, you are doing your best job for society as a whole. And the most important parameter, other than obeying the law, is to make sure that you have enough stocks and flows of financial capital to do that with. And what that means, therefore, is that our strategy, and therefore any investment cases that are rational, have to fit within this box, we might say. We can call this a logic one box. Short-term self-interest. What this does, of course, if you take a system where this is the governance and this is the way that decisions are made, and where the ultimate goal is not an innovation agenda, it is off it is not seen, but it's also off limits. And what sits underneath your financial capital, your non-financial capital, your stakeholders, and your social and environmental systems, like biodiversity, like climate change, are completely not included in your costs and are not considered to be valuable in a way that you need to do anything in your decision making about. If you take a system like that and you speed it up and you supercharge its size, how could we not have ended up in an unsustainable world? Both in terms of our products and services not helping often and often harming our well-being, and asset stripping and degrading for financial profit what sits at the bottom of the triangle, and then celebrating that as if that is success. The more money, the more profits, the more successful the organization, and therefore the more that society celebrates it. When what we're really doing is celebrating our own destruction. And so what matters is not only that this governance box creates the problem, but when the problems hit the box, the only way you can rationally respond is if there is a business case for short-term financial self-interest. And therefore, all of the major solutions are pretty much not in vision, never going to be passed. And any efforts to put laws in at the bottom of the triangle are seen as unnecessary costs that stop the organization doing what it's set up to do, which is in the middle of this triangle. Logic 2, then, is what we're seeing happening with the ESG agenda. As the problems of unsustainability hit this Logic 1 box, and the pressure from stakeholders gets bigger and bigger, it becomes harder to just do a CSR activity, a volunteer program. Let's get up the ESG. Let's look good on this area. Let's do some philanthropy over here. Stakeholders are not buying it, and they're saying, hang on a minute, you're causing destruction, you need to stop. And so what we've seen is what I would call Logic 2. So all the assumptions about how the market works, that we're rational, that we buy our well-being in the marketplace, that competition counters self-interest, and as long as you have enough competition and enough choice, then well-being is optimized. All these assumptions remain, but what changes is that the parameters move down. And ESG is essentially an effort to try to move governance parameters to not just be about stocks and flows of financial capital, but to say your strategy now also has to fit within a parameter of net zero, or no deforestation, or no social non-inclusion, no modern slavery in your supply chain. So these are parameters for decision making. But of course, the innovative goal of long-term well-being for all is still off the agenda. But this ESG agenda, and then I'll quickly move to the last logic, is essentially, we're starting with legislating for reporting and some aspects of reporting governance. But really, it's society ultimately saying, you cannot exist as an organization or a business or whatever kind of organization unless you can prove to us that you are, at a minimum, not asset stripping the basis of our collective long-term well-being for all. Organization is a social construct. Society has created it. Society enables organizations to exist. ESG, if we follow it to its logical conclusion, is a do no harm, but it is still saying, take our degraded precious resources, and as long as you don't harm them, you can use them to extract as much financial value for yourself as you want. So it is not an innovation agenda that is fit for the future of an unsustainable world, where we need to shift that around and drive our well-being, not just not harm our resources. But if it is not business and organizations like universities that are driving our well-being, who's doing that? Because there are no other organizations on a different planet that are working on our behalf to take our resources and drive our well-being. So this is where we have really missed the innovation agenda. And so finally, that leads me to purpose, which is Logic 3. And what shifts is, yes, you have to focus on the middle of the triangle in terms of stocks and flows of financial capital that are healthy, but you also need healthy stocks and flows of non-financial capitals, healthy stakeholders, hence stakeholder capitalism, and you need healthy social and environmental systems, yes. But You also need to recognize as an organization you exist to serve the betterment of society as a whole, and that is your innovation agenda. And we have never had an innovation agenda and a need for problem solving like we have had now. And so a purpose-driven organization exists. And the definition that is in the British Standard of Purpose and probably will be in the ISO is an optimal, a reason to exist that is an optimal strategic contribution to long-term well-being for all people and planet. In other words, no organization can do everything, but what is the best job that you can do as an organization to drive long-term well-being for all, that you exist to do, that is your identity, that's yours. So that is an organizational purpose, which has to be achieved within these parameters. And that then explodes the basis of which we can innovate and create strategy. And we can get rid of a lot of those assumptions about how we should act and how we shouldn't, who we should collaborate with and who we shouldn't, how we view human behavior. Are people rational, or do we need to bring in the wealth of sociology, anthropology, and psychology, and remember that we know more about ourselves than merely seeing ourselves as financially driven, self-interested beings, because we are purpose-driven, and as well as we could be many things, but one of our fundamental drives is the drive to serve others. And in logic 1 and 2, we have pushed that out of the room. In logic 3, we bring human values back into the organization and harness that energy, but not just in a way as Friedman critiqued, that we're just doing random acts of good. This is about a distinct governance system that says this is the good that we're going to optimize for, maximize, and this is the good that we will protect through our parameters in the process. So it is a very clear, very accountable system. And I will end there to say there's a British Standard in purpose-driven organizations you can download freely, but underway at the moment is the development of ISO 3711 in purpose-driven organizations. Now, this is the beginning of the world being able to come together and build consensus about how we operationalize the whole triangle governance. It is the first global version of that. There are up to 172 countries in ISO that can be part of that, and in any number of liaison organizations. I hope within a few years and maybe a few revisions of this standard, this will truly be a whole world conversation, because I don't think there is any other question that needs to be asked. The destination of our solution to our problems is not a product, a service, or a technology. It is a way of making decisions routinely that maximizes the probability that we drive our collective long-term well-being for all and do not harm it. That is the question that we need to answer, and this standard is the place that we can come together to answer it. Thank you very much. And there are some resources at the back.